I never thought marrying into the Whitmore family would feel like signing up for a lifetime membership at some exclusive club where I didn't belong. From the moment I walked into Thornhill Manor, a sprawling estate that screamed old money, I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. My name is Elias Thornfield, and if you're wondering why someone with a last name as plain as Thornfield ended up in this gilded cage, well, let's just say love has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. Sophia Whitmore was everything I wasn't. Elegant, poised, born into privilege. But beneath her polished exterior, she had a heart so big it made me forget all my doubts about whether I deserved her. We met at a charity gala where I was presenting one of my architectural designs, a community center project aimed at helping underprivileged kids. She approached me afterward, complimenting my work and asking thoughtful questions. That night, I realized two things. First, Sophia saw me for who I truly was, not what I lacked. Second, I was utterly smitten. But then there was Margaret Whitmore, Sophia's mother and the matriarch of the family. If Sophia was sunlight streaming through stained glass, Margaret was a storm cloud hovering over the cathedral. Every time we were in the same room, I felt her eyes dissecting me, searching for flaws to exploit. At family dinners, her barbed comments about my humble beginnings, or how architects weren't exactly known for their financial stability, cut deeper than I cared to admit. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. I loved Sophia, and she loved me. What else could I ask for? Or so I thought. Little did I know, Margaret Whitmore wasn't just going to sit back and watch me waltz into her perfect little world without putting up a fight. And trust me, she fights dirty. The cracks started showing sooner than I expected. It wasn't just Margaret's thinly veiled insults during those stiff, overly formal family dinners. No, it was subtler than that. The way she casually mentioned other men Sophia had dated before me, all of whom came from families far more illustrious than mine. Or the way she'd insist on calling me Eli, shortening my name like it was something disposable. Each jab was calculated, designed to remind me that I wasn't good enough for her daughter or her family. At first, I tried to brush it off. I figured Margaret was just protective of Sophia, maybe even a little jealous that her daughter had found someone who made her genuinely happy. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was brewing. One evening, after yet another awkward dinner at Thornhill Manor, Sophia caught me staring out the window, lost in thought. "What's wrong?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. Her voice was soft, concerned. "Nothing," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. But she didn't push. Instead, she kissed my cheek and whispered, "You're amazing, Elias. Don't ever doubt that." Her words warmed my heart, but they couldn't silence the nagging voice in my head. Margaret Whitmore wasn't going to stop anytime soon. And if I want to keep Sophia in my life, I needed to figure out how to navigate the treacherous waters of her family dynamics. Little did I know, the real battle was only beginning. It happened during Reginald's birthday dinner, a lavish affair complete with crystal chandeliers, fine china, and enough champagne to drown a small yacht. Margaret waited until dessert to strike. As the staff cleared away plates of creme brulee, she turned to me with a saccharine smile that didn't reach her eyes. "So, Eli," she began, drawing out my shortened name like it was an insult, "tell us again how your firm is doing. Must be challenging, working with such limited resources." The table fell silent. Even Sophia stopped mid-bite, sensing the tension crackling in the air. "It's going well, actually," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "We've landed a few major projects recently." "Oh, that's wonderful," Margaret said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Though I imagine it must be difficult competing against firms with, shall we say, deeper pockets. My jaw tightened. I glanced at Sophia, hoping for support, but she looked torn between defending me and avoiding confrontation. That's when Margaret delivered the final blow. "You know, dear," she continued, leaning back in her chair like a queen surveying her court, "some people might wonder if you married Sophia because you truly love her, or because you saw an opportunity to elevate your station in life." The room seemed to freeze. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then anger surged through me, hot and uncontrollable. Before I could respond, Sophia jumped in, her voice sharp. "That's enough, Mother," she snapped. "Elias loves me and I love him. End of discussion." Margaret raised an eyebrow but didn't press further, at least not in front of everyone. Later that night, though, she cornered me in the study. "I'll give you one chance to walk away quietly," she hissed, her cold eyes boring into mine. "Leave Sophia, and I'll make sure no harm comes to your precious career. Refuse, and you'll regret it." I stared at her, disbelief warring with fury. Who did she think she was? Threatening me like some villain in a bad movie. But as I left Thornhill Manor that night, I realized one thing. Margaret Whitmore meant business, and she wasn't bluffing. After that disastrous dinner, I knew I couldn't ignore Margaret's threats any longer. Something about the way she spoke, so confident, so certain, made my skin crawl. I decided to dig deeper, started with my own records. That's when I noticed the first red flag. A bank account I didn't open, linked to my social security number. A few days later, I received an email notification about a credit card application I hadn't submitted. Panic set in. Someone was impersonating me, and I didn't need Sherlock Holmes to figure out who was behind it. Margaret Whitmore had declared war, and I was her unwilling soldier. I called Nina Patel, an old friend and investigative journalist, who owed me a favor. Over coffee at a bustling cafe in downtown Hartford, I laid out everything, from Margaret's ultimatum to the mysterious accounts popping up in my name. "This smells like sabotage," Nina said, tapping her pen against the table. "But proving it won't be easy. Do you have proof linking Margaret to these accounts?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but I'm willing to bet she hired someone to do her dirty work. Can you help me track them down?" Nina smirked. "Consider it done. Just don't get yourself killed while I'm digging around." Her flippancy masked the seriousness of the situation, but I appreciated the humor. As I left the cafe, I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in days. If anyone could uncover Margaret's schemes, it was Nina. Still, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. Nina wasted no time getting to work. Within a week, she sent me a text with a subject line, "You're not going to like this." I opened it while sitting in my home office, staring at blueprints for a new project I could barely focus on. Her message was short and chilling. "Found traces of a private investigator hired under Margaret's name. They've been digging into your past, specifically that construction accident from years ago. Be careful, Elias. This isn't just about ruining your reputation anymore. She's trying to bury you." The construction accident. Of course. It had been an unfortunate incident early in my career, a scaffolding collapse that resulted in the death of a co-worker. The authorities ruled it accidental, and I wasn't directly involved beyond being part of the team. But now, thanks to Margaret's twisted agenda, it felt like a black mark I'd never escape. I called Nina immediately. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough," she replied, her tone unusually grave. "Whoever's working for Margaret has connections. They've already leaked hints of this story to some low-tier gossip blogs. If they push harder, it'll blow up. And trust me, once it hits the mainstream media, you'll be toxic." My stomach churned. What do I do? "For starters, stop acting like a sitting duck," she shot back. "Start documenting everything, emails, texts, anything suspicious, and keep Sophia close. Margaret will try to drive a wedge between you two next. Don't let her win." Her words echoed in my mind long after we hung up. That night, as Sophia and I sat together on the couch watching TV, I debated whether to tell her what was happening. Part of me wanted to protect her from the ugliness brewing behind the scenes, but another part knew I couldn't face this alone. Finally, I turned to her. "Sophia, there's something I need to tell you." Her expression shifted instantly. "What is it?" As I explained everything, the fake accounts, the PI, the construction accident, I watched her go from confusion to anger. By the end, her fists were clenched and her voice trembled. "She can't get away with this," Sophia said fiercely. "We'll fight back. Together." Her determination gave me strength, but I couldn't shake the fear gnawing at me. Margaret Whitmore wasn't just fighting dirty. She was playing to destroy. Margaret didn't waste any time escalating her attacks. A few days later, Sophia received an anonymous package containing old newspaper clippings about the construction accident. Alongside them was a typed note. Is this the kind of man you want to spend your life with? Someone who hides his secrets. Sophia confronted me almost immediately. Why didn't you tell me about this before? She demanded, waving the clippings in my face. I did tell you. I protested, though guilt prickled at me. Just not all the details. I thought it was irrelevant. It was ruled an accident. But you didn't think it was important enough to mention when we got married? She shot back, tears brimming in her eyes. For the first time since we'd met, I saw doubt creeping into her gaze. Margaret's plan was working. She was planting seeds of mistrust, and I couldn't stop them from taking root. Later that evening, Edward, Sophia's younger brother and Margaret's favorite ally, showed up unannounced at our apartment. He looked smug, leaning against the doorway like he owned the place. Mom told me everything, he sneered. Guess marrying into the family wasn't such a great idea after all. Huh, Elias? I clenched my jaw. If you're here to deliver more of your mother's threats, save it. I'm done playing games. Edward smirked. Oh, this isn't a threat. It's a promise. You think Dad's going to stand by you when the truth comes out? Newsflash. He doesn't care about you. To him, you're just another problem to sweep under the rug. His words stung more than I cared to admit. As much as I hated to admit it, Edward was right about one thing. Reginald Whitmore hadn't exactly been warm toward me. Sure, he tolerated me for Sophia's sake, but loyalty? That was a stretch. When Edward finally left, slamming the door behind him, I sank onto the couch, exhausted. Sophia sat beside me, silent for a moment before speaking. We have to prove her wrong, she said softly. Whatever it takes. Her resolve reignited mine. We might be outnumbered, but we weren't outmatched, not yet. With Nina's help, I began piecing together Margaret's operation. She hadn't acted alone. She had accomplices within the Whitmore empire, people loyal to her cause. One name kept popping up. Victor Langley, a high-powered attorney who specialized in corporate sabotage. Victor was infamous for dismantling careers and reputations, and it seemed Margaret had enlisted him to take me down. But the real breakthrough came when Nina uncovered trail leading to Margaret herself, or rather, her past. Buried in old court records was a scandal involving Reginald's first love, a woman named Eleanor Hayes. According to the documents, Eleanor had mysteriously disappeared from public life shortly after breaking off her engagement to Reginald. Rumors swirled that she'd embezzled funds from his company, but nothing was ever proven. Something about the timing struck me as suspicious. I dug deeper and found a damning detail. Margaret had been instrumental in exposing Eleanor's alleged crimes. At the time, she was a rising star in Reginald's social circle, eager to secure her position as his future wife. Could it be possible? Had Margaret orchestrated the entire scandal to eliminate her competition? If so, it meant she played this game before, and won. I shared my findings with Sophia, who listened in stunned silence. Do you think Dad knows? She whispered. I don't know, I admitted, but if we play our cards right, this could be the key to stopping her. Sophia nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. Then let's make sure she loses, for good. Armed with the knowledge of Margaret's past, I decided it was time to confront her head-on. I arranged a meeting at Thornhill Manor, citing urgent family matters. When I arrived, Margaret greeted me with her usual icy demeanor, flanked by Victor Langley, who looked every bit the shark he was rumored to be. What is this about, Eli? Margaret asked, her tone laced with impatience. It's about Eleanor Hayes, I said bluntly, watching her reaction carefully. For the briefest moment, her mask slipped, her lips tightened, and her knuckles whitened around the teacup she held. Then, as quickly as it appeared, her composure returned. I have no idea what nonsense you're referring to, she said dismissively. Oh, I think you do, I countered, pulling out copies of court records and placing them on the table. You destroyed Eleanor to get what you wanted. Now you're doing the same to me. Except this time, I'm not going to let you win. Victor stepped forward, his voice smooth and menacing. Be careful, Mr. Thornfield. Accusing someone of defamation without evidence can land you in serious trouble. I'm not accusing anyone, I replied coolly. I'm stating facts. Facts that, if made public, would destroy everything you worked so hard to build, Margaret. Her eyes narrowed. Are you threatening me? No, I said, leaning closer. I'm promising you. If you don't back off, I'll expose the truth about Eleanor and whatever else I find along the way. The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Margaret's eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. After my confrontation with Margaret, an eerie calm settled over Thornhill Manor. It was a kind of quiet that comes before a hurricane, the air heavy with anticipation. Every moment stretched thin like a wire ready to snap. Margaret didn't respond directly to my threat, but her silence spoke volumes. She was planning something big. I could feel it. Sophia and I spent the next few days preparing for whatever came next. We fortified our defenses, documenting everything, securing legal counsel, and even hiring a cybersecurity expert to monitor our accounts for any further tampering. But as much as we tried to stay proactive, the weight of the situation bore down on us both. One night, as we sat together in bed, Sophia turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever wonder what we would have done differently if we'd known how complicated this would be? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Every day. But then I remember why we're fighting. For us. For the life we want to build together. She nodded, rested her head on my shoulder. I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much. Her words stayed with me long after she fell asleep. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about preserving the love we shared. And yet, no matter how hard I fought, I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret still held all the cards. It started with whispers, a blog post here, a tabloid article there. Then, like wildfire, the story exploded across social media and mainstream news outlets. Headlines screamed variations of the same narrative. Architect husband hides dark past from Whitmore heiress. And did love blind Sophia Whitmore? The articles were brutal, painting me as a manipulative opportunist who had wormed his way into the Whitmore family under false pretenses. They dredged up every detail of the construction accident, twisting facts until they barely resembled the truth. Worst of all, they included quotes attributed to anonymous sources within the Whitmore empire, sources I knew were planted by Margaret. My phone buzzed nonstop with calls from reporters and colleagues alike. Some offered sympathy. Others demanded explanations. Clients began pulling out of projects, citing concerns about associating with someone embroiled in scandal. By the end of the week, my once thriving firm was teetering on the brink of collapse. But the personal toll hit harder than the professional one. Strangers online attacked me relentlessly, calling me everything from a gold digger to a murderer. Walking down the street felt like navigating a gauntlet of judgmental stares. Even worse, Sophia's resolve began to waver. I believe you, Elias, she said one evening, tears streaming down her face. But I can't ignore the fact that everyone else thinks you're guilty. How are we supposed to move forward like this? Her question haunted me. For the first time, I wondered if maybe Margaret had won after all. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Reginald summoned me to his office at Whitmore Energy headquarters. The building itself was a monument to wealth and power, towering glass walls, marble floors, an atmosphere so sterile it felt suffocating. Reginald greeted me with none of his usual warmth. Instead, he gestured for me to sit across from him at his massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. I assume you know why I called you here, he began, his voice clipped. I think so, I replied cautiously, but I'd rather hear from you. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like a chess piece he wasn't sure how to play. The press has been relentless. My shareholders are questioning my judgment. And now, thanks to your indiscretions, the Whitmore name is being dragged to the mud. Indiscretions. The word stung, not because it was true, but because it came from him. The man who had always seemed indifferent to Margaret's antics now looked at me like I was the root of all evil. I didn't do anything wrong, I said firmly. This is Margaret's doing. She's trying to tear us apart. Reginald sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Elias, I want to believe you. I really do. But the evidence is fabricated. I interrupted, slamming my hands on the desk. Ask yourself this. Why would Margaret go to such lengths unless she had something to gain? Something beyond protecting her precious reputation? For a moment, he hesitated. I saw a doubt flicker in his eyes, a crack in the armor he wore so well. But then his gaze hardened again. Until you can prove otherwise, I have no choice but to distance myself and my company from you. His words hit like a punch to the gut. As I left the office, I realized the stakes had never been higher. If I couldn't expose Margaret's schemes, and fast, I risked losing everything. Desperation drove me to take drastic measures. With Nina's help, I arranged a secret meeting with Eleanor Hayes herself. After years of living in obscurity, she agreed to speak with me under strict confidentiality. What she revealed changed everything. They made it look like I stole from Reginald, Eleanor explained, her voice trembling with emotion. But it was Margaret. She forged documents, falsified records. It was all her plan to ruin me. Once I was gone, she swooped in and claimed her prize. Armed with Eleanor's testimony and additional evidence Nina uncovered, I finally had the ammunition I needed to turn the tables on Margaret. But exposing her meant going public with information that would devastate the Whitmore family, including Sophia. I found Sophia waiting for me at home, her face pale with worry. "What happened?" she asked immediately. "I found proof," I said, holding up the folder containing our evidence. "Proof that your mother orchestrated this entire nightmare. But using it would destroy her, and possibly your father too." Sophia sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Why does it always have to come to this? Why can't we just be happy? I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. Because sometimes happiness means standing up for what's right, even if it hurts. "Are you with me?" She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Let's finish this." The next morning, I called a press conference at a neutral venue, a small auditorium downtown. Word spread quickly, and by the time we arrived, reporters packed the room, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Sophia stood beside me, her hand gripping mine tightly, while Nina hovered nearby, ready to step in if things went south. I began by addressing the accusations against me, laying out the timeline of events and presenting evidence that directly contradicted Margaret's narrative. Then came the bombshell. Eleanor Hayes took the stage, her presence commanding silence from the crowd. "Margaret Whitmore destroyed my life," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "She manipulated the truth to serve her own ambitions, and she's doing it again now to Elias Thornfield." The room erupted into chaos as reporters shouted questions and snapped photos. Through it all, I kept my eyes locked on Sophia. Her expression was unreadable, but I knew this moment would change her relationship with her mother, and possibly her father, forever. By the end of the press conference, the tide had shifted. Social media lit up with calls for accountability, and even some of Margaret's closest allies within the Whitmore empire began distancing themselves from her. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. But Margaret wasn't done yet. That evening, Margaret stormed into our apartment uninvited, her face flushed with rage. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Instead, she launched straight into a tirade. "How dare you drag my name through the mud?" she spat, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "You think you can destroy everything I've worked for? You're nothing but a parasite feeding off this family." Sophia stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "No, Mother. You're the one who's been lying and manipulating. We know what you did to Eleanor, and we have proof. If you don't stop this now, we'll make sure the world knows everything." For a moment, Margaret looked genuinely shaken, but then her lips curled into a cold smile. "And what about your father, Sophia? Do you really think he'll forgive you for betraying him like this?" Her words hit their mark. Sophia hesitated, her resolve wavering. Sensing weakness, Margaret pressed harder. "You may win this battle, Elias," she sneered, turning back to me. "But you'll never be accepted here. Not truly. And when Reginald realizes what you've cost him, he'll turn on you too." With that, She swept out of the apartment, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Sophia sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. "She's right, isn't she?" she whispered. "Dad will never forgive us for this." I sat beside her, pulling her close. "Maybe not right away, but we're doing the right thing for us and for anyone else she might hurt in the future." Sophia nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. As much as we wanted to believe justice would prevail, the road ahead promised to be long and painful. Reginald's reaction came sooner than expected. He called an emergency family meeting at Thornhill Manor, his tone brooking no argument. When we arrived, the tension in the room was palpable. Edward avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable, while Margaret sat rigidly beside Reginald, her expression unreadable. Reginald wasted no time getting to the point. "What you've done is unacceptable," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Publicly humiliating your own family? Dragging our name through the mud? How could you?" "It wasn't about humiliating anyone," Sophia countered, stepping forward. "It was about exposing the truth, about holding Mother accountable for what she's done, not just to Elias, but to Eleanor and to everyone else she's hurt along the way." Reginald's gaze flickered toward Margaret, who remained eerily silent. For the first time, I saw cracks forming in his carefully constructed facade. "Is it true?" he asked her quietly. Margaret stiffened. "Of course not. They're twisting facts to suit their agenda." But her denial lacked conviction, and Reginald noticed. He turned back to Sophia and me, his shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world rested on them. "I need time to process this," he said finally. "All of you, leave me alone until I figure out what to do next." As we filed out of the room, I caught a glimpse of Margaret's face. It was etched with fear and something else, desperation. She had spent decades building her empire, and now it was crumbling around her. Days passed in uneasy limbo. Reginald retreated to his study, refusing to see anyone except Margaret, whose influence over him seemed to waver with each passing hour. Meanwhile, public opinion continued to shift against her. Former employees came forward with stories of her ruthless tactics, and even some of the Whitmore board members began calling for her resignation from the company's charitable foundation. Then, late one night, Sophia received a frantic call from her father. His voice was barely coherent, but one phrase stood out: "She's gone too far this time." We rushed to Thornhill Manor, where we found Reginald sitting alone in the library, clutching a stack of documents. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands trembling. "She admitted it," he said hoarsely. "Everything. The lies, the manipulation, the sabotage. All of it. She thought I wouldn't care as long as she protected the family name." Sophia knelt beside him, her voice breaking. "Dad?" "No," he interrupted, shaking his head. "Let me finish. I spent my entire life letting her control things. Our business, our reputation, even our relationships. But not anymore. This ends now." With that, he handed me the documents, a full confession from Margaret, detailing every scheme she'd orchestrated over the years. It was more than enough to ensure her downfall. But as I looked at Reginald, I saw not triumph, but heartbreak. The woman he had loved for decades was a stranger, and he had only himself to blame for ignoring the signs. Margaret's confession didn't just bring her empire crashing down. It fractured the Whitmore family in ways none of us could have anticipated. The next morning, Reginald filed for separation, citing irreconcilable differences. For a man who had always prided himself on his stoic demeanor, the move was shocking. But it wasn't just about ending his marriage. It was about reclaiming his integrity and, perhaps, finding redemption. Sophia and I watched from the sidelines as the media circus reached its peak. Margaret, stripped of her power and influence, retreated to a secluded estate she owned in the countryside. Rumors swirled that she was planning a comeback. But without Reginald's backing, her resources were limited. Even Edward distanced himself from her, moving to New York under guise of starting fresh. Still, the victory felt hollow. Sophia spent hours sitting by the window, staring out at nothing in particular. One evening, I joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You think we did the right thing?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "But doing the right thing doesn't mean it won't hurt. Your mom crossed lines she shouldn't have, and someone had to stop her. That doesn't make what happened any easier, though. Sophia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I just wish it didn't have to end like this. She's still my mom. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. As much as Margaret had wronged us, she was still part of Sophia's life, a fact neither of us could ignore. Reginald began reaching out to me, tentatively at first, then more openly. He invited me to lunch one afternoon at a quiet cafe near his office. When I arrived, he looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his shoulders slightly stooped, but there was a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I owe you an apology, he said after we ordered, for not seeing the truth sooner, for letting Margaret dictate so much of our lives. You were trying to protect your family, I offered gently. It's not easy to admit when someone you trust has betrayed you. He sighed, running a hand over his face. That's no excuse. I failed you, Elias, and I failed Sophia, but I want to make it right, if you'll let me. His sincerity caught me off guard. For so long, I had viewed Reginald as an obstacle, a man too blinded by wealth and tradition to see past his wife's manipulations. But now, I saw him differently, as someone searching for redemption, just like the rest of us. I'd like that, I said finally. We both would. By the time we left the cafe, I felt a glimmer of hope, not just for myself, but for Sophia and her father. Maybe healing was possible, even after everything. With Margaret out of the picture, the Whitmore name slowly began to recover. Reginald took steps to distance the family business from her toxic legacy, implementing reforms to ensure transparency and accountability. Public opinion shifted again, this time in our favor, as people admired the courage it took to expose the truth, even at great personal cost. Sophia and I decided it was time to start fresh. We sold our apartment in Hartford and moved to a quieter town along the Connecticut shoreline. There, I opened a small architectural firm focused on sustainable design, while Sophia pursued her passion for painting, hosting art workshops for local children. It wasn't the glamorous life some might expect, but it was ours, and it was enough. One day, as we walked along the beach hand in hand, Sophia turned to me with a smile. You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad everything happened the way it did. It made us stronger. I squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Me too. And hey, if your mom ever decides to apologize, maybe we can find room in our hearts to forgive her. Sophia laughed, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Months later, an envelope arrived in the mail, one that sent chills down my spine. It bore Margaret's handwriting, elegant and precise, just like her. Inside was a single sheet of paper filled with her words. Elias, if you're reading this, it means I've lost everything or nearly everything. I won't pretend to justify my actions. They speak for themselves. But I will say this. You've proven yourself to be far stronger than I gave you credit for. Take care of my daughter, Elias. She deserves happiness, even if it comes at my expense. Margaret. I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure how to feel. Was it genuine remorse? Or another ploy to manipulate us from afar? When I showed it to Sophia, she read it silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, she folded the letter and handed it back to me. What do you think? I asked cautiously. I think, she said slowly, that she's finally realizing the damage she caused. Whether or not she truly regrets it, that's something only she can answer. We agreed not to respond. Some wounds needed time to heal, and forgiveness wasn't something we could rush. Still, I couldn't help but wonder if Margaret's letter marked the beginning of her own journey toward redemption, or simply the end of hers. Life settled into a rhythm of quiet contentment. My firm flourished, earning recognition for its innovative designs, while Sophia's artwork gained attention in local galleries. Together, we built a life rooted in authenticity and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the gilded cage of Thornhill Manor. Reginald visited occasionally, bringing updates about the changes he was making within the Whitmore empire, though he rarely spoke of Margaret. It was clear he carried the weight of their shared history. Once, during one of these visits, he pulled me aside. "Thank you," he said simply, "for standing by Sophia, for showing me what real strength looks like." The gratitude in his voice touched me deeply. In many ways, we had all grown stronger through adversity. Scarred, yes, but wiser too. As for Margaret, she remained a ghost in the background, her presence felt but unseen. Occasionally, rumors surfaced about her attempts to rebuild her life, but she stayed largely out of the public eye. Perhaps that was for the best. Just when we thought the storm had passed, an unexpected twist threw everything into chaos once more. A journalist contacted me, claiming to have uncovered new evidence linking Margaret to yet another scandal, one involving illegal offshore accounts tied to the Whitmore Foundation. At first, I dismissed it as more sensationalism, but then Nina called, her voice urgent. "Elias, you need to hear this. The evidence is legit, and it implicates Reginald, too." My heart sank. After everything we'd been through, it seemed Margaret's sins ran deeper than anyone realized, and Reginald had unknowingly been complicit. Sophia and I faced an impossible choice: expose the truth and risk destroying what little remained of her family, or stay silent and let justice go unserved. In the end, we chose transparency, not out of malice, but because the truth deserved to see the light. Reginald, devastated but resigned, stepped down from his position, vowing to make amends. And Margaret? She disappeared entirely, leaving behind only whispers of her existence. Years later, Sophia and I stood together on the porch of our cozy seaside home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Our daughter, Lily, played in the yard, her laughter echoing in the cool evening air. "She's beautiful," Sophia murmured, leaning against me. "A perfect mix of both of us." "She is," I agreed, kissing the top of her head. We had weathered storms that would have torn most couples apart, yet here we were, stronger than ever. The scars of the past lingered, but they serve as reminders of how far we'd come. As the stars emerged one by one, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And sometimes that was all that mattered. Looking back, I realized the true lesson of our journey wasn't about winning or losing. It was about resilience, about holding on to love and truth, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Margaret's downfall taught us that power unchecked corrupts absolutely, but also reminded us of the importance of accountability and forgiveness. Though I doubted I'd ever fully understand Margaret, I came to accept that she was human, flawed, broken, and desperate to hold on to the illusion of control. Her story was a cautionary tale, one I hope future generations would learn from. As for Sophia and me, we carried forward with hope and gratitude for each other, for our family, and for the second chances life had given us. Because sometimes breaking free from the shadows of the past isn't just about survival. It's about finding the light and embracing it wholeheartedly.